today, for those customers that were just starting out and using memory wire and wanted to go to the next step, which will help them to design more necklaces and bracelets. Yeah, bracelets. I am just going to do a short, hopefully it'll be short, on how to put crimps and crimp covers and clasps on beading wire. And that allows you multiple choices. You go out and buy whatever beads you like, put it on in the order that you like, and make either a necklace or a bracelet. Probably a few other things too. I've done earrings with beading wires and crimps. Actually, there's a pair here that I probably showed in my last video, and that's made on beading wire with a crimp and crimp cover. Crimping crimp cover. Put it under the camera, Alan. Okay, so we will start. I have my soft flex fine beading wire, 10-pound strength, and I don't need any thicker or heavier. And I have my 2x2 millimeter crimps and my 4 millimeter crimp covers, which are appropriate for that size crimp. I have split rings that I use to put on one end of the bracelet for the lobster clasp on the other, rather than split rings, because sometimes split rings aren't closed well enough and the beading wire will slip out, and it's really a bear to try to repair. Wow, I'm a poet. Okay, starting with my beading wire, which you can barely see. Right in front of me is so bright I can't believe it from the sun, but my screen looks really dark. I hope that it turns out lighter, or I can lighten it. I'm putting my crimp bead on my beading wire, and I always start on the ring side of the clasp unit, because it's harder to put on at the end than it is at the beginning. So I have my crimp bead on. I'm going through my split ring, and then I'm going back through. Let me show you it. Crimp beads here, split rings there. Now I'm going back through the crimp bead. I pull it down, leaving just a little bit of a loop on the end of the wire. So just in case you are using a split ring and it pulls through, you have that little loop to attach another one to. And I will be closing this with a crimping plier, which is over here. Crimping pliers have 2 grooves, 2 in the back, 1 across from the other, and in the front. We start by placing that crimp bead, or it's actually a crimp tube, in the back groove, centered in the back groove. A little clumsy at first. You have to find a way that your hand is comfortable opening and closing the plier while you're holding it. For me, well, it looks like I'm a contortionist, but I'm not. Okay, we have that crimp tube in the back groove. I'm holding the wires separated, and I'm crimping really hard. And what that does is it puts, I think you can see, it puts a crimp right in the center so that there is a piece of wire on either side. Now I take that crimping plier and I turn it over and I place it with the grooves in the front, 1 on each side, and squeeze. Now that crimp bead is folded in half. You have a piece of wire on either side, and that is never coming out of that crimp bead. However, crimp beads are not pretty. That's why a lot of people use smaller ones, but they're not that secure. So there is this option. Crimp covers. They're like tiny little Pac-Men. Take my crimp cover and lay that crimp tube right inside of that Pac-Man and lay it down so that the Pac-Man is sitting up and it's opened like that. It's the U shape. You can take either a flat nose plier or the crimping plier and go over the top. Let's see if I can put it in my hand. You can see better. Not real sure. I mean, these guys are small and they get away from you in your hand. But for the sake of seeing it better, I'm going to try. Come on, you. Get in there and let me pick you up closer to the camera. Don't be stubborn. Okay, now I'm hoping that you can see the tube is open here and the crimp is inside. So now I'm taking my flat nose. How can you see it? And going over the top and squeezing that Pac-Man closed. So now it just looks like a pretty little silver bead instead of that ugly crimp. Okay, then whatever beads you have chosen, go to your craft store, buy from Etsy. You just go ahead and string them on. I'll put a few on here. What did I do? I put one of those, one of those. Oh. You get the idea. I put a few on there. Actually, I went ahead and started a bracelet. And what happens, let me get these beads out of the way. What happens is you wind up with this little wire sticking out here. What you need to do, but I wait till the end of the bracelet because it's just going to come out again. But at the end of the bracelet, I'll wind up just threading that leftover wire through the beads along with the other until it's all covered up. Pretty simple. So it's not hanging out anymore. If there were a little tiny piece hanging out, I would take my little snipper tool and cut it off. But here we are. We have one end done, and we're going to repeat. This is probably a 7.5-inch bracelet. I mean, it's so simple to string beads on. Okay, so here we are at the other end, and I have my wire, and I have my crimp tube. I will put that crimp tube on. I have a lobster clasp here, and all of your clasps should have a little loop on the end. Like here's the, well, there's a toggle with no loop. Must have been broken. Okay, but most clasps have a little loop at the end. I have my crimp tube on. I'm going through the loop on my lobster. I have them both on there, the crimp and the lobster. And I'm going to go back through the crimp tube. I've got that little piece sticking out there. I'm going to hold my bracelet up like this so all the beads fall down to the end. And then I'm going to pull on that extra piece of string until it gets up close to the lobster. The crimp bead gets up close to the lobster. Again, leaving a little loop. A little, that's not big enough. A little loop just in case something happens to the clasp. Some clasps just break, but it won't be a problem if you have that little loop of beading wire. You could always add, with a jump ring, add another clasp on it. You could use a tiny jump ring, like a 4mm or 3mm. But again, just as before, I am taking my crimping plier like a contortionist, that I can open and close it. Well, I'm not really doing a good job. Get that crimp in the back groove. Now again, I'm making sure that there's also a little bit of space left below the crimp bead, because you're putting a crimp cover on there and you need that space. So back to, slide this back to the back of the crimping plier groove. Squeeze really tight. It's folded in half, and I forgot to mention I am holding these separate so that there's a piece of wire on each end of that fold. Again, my crimping plier, I'm putting it over the top of that crimp and put it between the two front grooves and squeeze, which is folding it a second time. And before I put my crimp cover on, I'm going to fold. I have to fold the laundry. No, I'm going to pass that excess wire through a few beads, because once the crimp cover is on, you may not have enough room to do it. And even if you just go through one bead, that's fine. Which is probably going to happen here because it's giving me a hard time. Okay. I think it actually went through two. Yep, I have a skinny little round nose plier that I am going to grab that with, because it's between two beads and I'm not able to grab it. I'll pull it through and snip it off. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, how about up here? Of course, these things always happen when you're doing a video. So I'm pulling back through and just going through one, bending it so it comes out the bottom of that one. Then I can go through another one if I want. And I'm a little bit of a security nut, so I'll go through that second one, at least two beads, pull it through, hold your snipping tool really close to the bead that it's coming out of. Careful not to clip the wire underneath. Always when you're making a video, things don't work. Okay, so now we have just one more step. I mean, that's really a pretty bracelet, and I don't think you'd get that on memory wire. Okay, so now we're going to, again, sit that folded, double folded crimp tube. I'm going to sit that in the little Pac-Man, the crimp cover. I'm going to take my flat nose plier, go over the top of it, so I have one side of the plier on each side, and squeeze it closed. Sometimes a little extra squeezing helps. Okay, so there we have it. A nice finished end for beading on beading wire for necklaces or bracelets. That really is a pretty bracelet. I think I'm keeping that one. If you want to make a pair of earrings to go with it, I will do this really quick. It's really simple. I have always used 3-inch, well, not always, for the most part, 3-inch head pins, because I can make the earrings any length that I want. So I'm going to make a real quick short earring, just for the sake of not making this video too long. I'll put on a couple of beads. We have, make it look a little bit like that bracelet. Just putting all, well, I probably should have started, for those that haven't used head pins before, that a head pin usually has a flat head at one end and a pointy on the other end. So you would be threading some beads on here, as I did. I started with a bicone, a bead cap, a round bead, you're the designer. You just go out and buy your beads and whatever looks good to you. So here I have what will be my first earring. Now I have, holding it straight up, take a round nose plier, grab at the very top of, where's the camera? If I would use the camera in the same place every time, I'd probably benefit greatly. Okay, it's placed right above the top bead. I want a little bit more room. There's a little room in here. I'm going to bend that head pin at a 90-degree angle. I'm going to grab the end of the head pin and pull it up and over my round nose plier. Then I'm going to flip my plier up. It was here. I pulled the wire over. Now I'm going to flip the plier up and go underneath. Then I will grab that loop. First, let's put an ear wire on. I'm going to grab the loop and make a little space in there so I can put an ear wire on. And I didn't do a good job on this, but okay. So the ear wire is in the loop. I'm grabbing the loop that I just made. I left too much room here, but this is just for a short how-to. And I take that extra wire and I wrap it around the stem of the wire a couple of times. If you have extra room, usually I do 2 or 3 wraps, and then cut the excess off. I love this little snipper tool, side cutter. I mean, it's got such a pointy end, it gets in as close as possible. Now, I should have put my hand over that so that the wire didn't go flying, and it did go flying. Usually I cover it or I point it down before I cut, but because I'm focused on being under the camera, I forgot. Okie dokie. 1 earring will do. You just repeat that a second time. So here is a very pretty necklace and bracelet, and I'm going to call this video Beyond Memory Wire. Have a good day. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please send me a message and be sure to subscribe.